Hi, thanks for popping through to my video. My name's Natasha and I'm Art and Design. I do a range of traditional painting tutorials as well as digital tutorials. This one today is a digital painting of a town called Padstow in Cornwall, which is near to where I live. And this time, instead of doing a screen record where you can't really see what I'm doing on the outside of the screen, I've decided to record me drawing and using the tools on the screen from the outside. So I hope that will be a bit more helpful. So I didn't start the recording till I'd got a little bit way through and thought, well, it might be good just to show it. And I set the camera up so that you could see. It's kind of around my neck and it can be a bit wibbly wobbly at stages, so I apologise for any shaking. So I got as far as drawing the outlines. The image is in the corner, as you can see, for what I was trying to replicate. My style that I generally do use for my landscapes and seascapes that I sell locally is quite a loose style. It's a pen and watercolor style, be it I do that with real watercolors or watercolors on here. They both have the positives and negatives, pros and cons. I just use whatever I feel like using at the time. So sometimes it might be like this on the screen and sometimes I might do it with actual watercolor paints. So this one actually helps. I like to do digital when my arms are hurting because I have fibromyalgia, so it really helps just to have this, and I can stop and start and it doesn't really make any difference. But I don't like to stop in the middle of doing an actual watercolor painting because you're trying to just have some kind of method as you go along and keep going with it, and stopping and starting isn't good. But on the digital it's much easier. So you will see there's bits where I cut out and then I start again the next bit, so I'm probably stopping and starting. So basically here, in order to do digital painting, you will need some kind of tablet with a touch screen and some kind of electronic digital pen. A lot of people have the iPads and the iPad pens. I have a Microsoft Surface Pro that I absolutely love, and the software I'm using here is Adobe Fresco because I have the Adobe software suite anyway. So the Adobe Fresco comes with the whole suite. So at the moment I am working in layers. Sadly you can't see the layers at the moment, they are to the right of the screen, but I'm hoping they come in later. It's very difficult to be able to record what you're doing and also see how the recording is going, so you just kind of have to keep your fingers crossed that you've got the screen in the right place, because really my focus was on the painting and just hoping that I got a good visual on it. So over on the right side I have the layers. So when I paint digitally I paint in layers, so it looks like I'm going over my pencil drawing that I've already done, but I'm really not, because with digital you can go over like that and then you bring the layer down underneath your drawing layer, and then the drawing layer comes on top of what you've just painted. So yeah, hopefully I can explain that better, and I might even do a separate video just on that, but hopefully I will get them in screen at some point. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm looking back and forth from the image, checking the colours. Are they similar? I'm not too worried. As I said, my style is quite loose. I just like to get a general idea of colours and outlines. I'm not too specific. I just try to enjoy it really, because I think if I've enjoyed it, it will show in the picture itself. You can tell. So here I'm just trying to mix some colours by clicking on the brush, and down comes a drop box, and you can move the colour button around to find the colours you like. Now what's really good about digital is you can have a go with a colour, and then when you've had a go with that colour and you've decided that you don't like it, you can quite easily just press backspace and it undoes what you've done. So actually doing digital painting is a good way of practicing what colours you like, don't like, and then when you come to the real thing, you don't make so many mistakes because you've learned from this way of doing things. So here I'm just showing you, you go in, the colours you've chosen as you've gone along are down the bottom in the block there. So it means if you want to choose another colour that you've already used, it's already there just by clicking on the brush button. When you click on the brush button, there's a colour wheel to choose from. There's the colours you've already used in the painting, and there's usually something about flow, particularly with watercolour, so how I don't know how, the thickness of the flow, the spaces between the droplets, things like that, so you can change it to how you want it. It's difficult to explain. Best thing is just to get stuck in and have a go, really, and that's how I learned. So yeah, I think here I just wanted to show you that's why you're only looking at that part of the screen, and I do move it back again in a minute. So again, it looks like I'm going over my drawing, but I'm not. Eventually the drawing will come back when I put this painting layer underneath, but it helps me to see what I'm doing, to kind of go over and go around things. I don't like to do it while it's underneath, because then I'm a bit too careful and I like to be loose with it. You can also, when you're on the same layer, you can then put colours on top of each other and mix them, and that's how I do the water effect later on. So basically, if you use different colours on the same layer, different brush strokes, they will mix like normal paints would. If you use different layers, it's almost like you've left it to dry, and then you go on another layer and you paint on top of that layer, so it will show up with more clarity. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I think I'm trying to pick a colour because I couldn't quite make the colour I wanted. So what you can do is click on the colour picker, go to the point on your reference image, and then click on the colour you want. So there was a grey, but it was like a bluey grey, and it really kind of stood out to me. So I was struggling to find it. My grey was a bit too grey. Yeah, so that's a really good way of finding a colour. And even when I clicked on it, I still wasn't quite happy. So you saw me just fiddle about with the colour wheel, and then I got to the colour I wanted. So now I'm mixing in some of the other greys. It's off screen, sorry about that. And I'm going along and making them a bit more bluey grey as well. And I think my intention was just to show the reflection of the sea and the sky within some of the grey parts of the image. And you can see I'm going back and forth with the colours, depending on which area I'm working on, just changing the colours as I go. It's very easy. You just click on the brush, and then you click on the colour that you want, that you've already used, or use the colour wheel to find the colour you want. There's absolutely every colour you can think of. So as I'm doing this now, I'll be quiet for a bit and let you watch. Here I'm now just starting to pull out some colours from the background. Again, it's the background, so you don't need to worry too much. Just look at the general colours that you can see on the image and pop them in. There, I've just put the layer underneath the pencil drawing, and you could see then that the drawing popped out. So yeah, it's really good to work in layers like that. And now I'm going in to do some more colouring, painting in the sections, but on another new layer. checking for bits that I've missed. Or if I'm on a colour, say I'm on a dark grey, I'll look at the whole image and think, where else is that dark grey, rather than having to come back to it later. But if I'm wanting to mix that dark grey colour with something else, I need to do it on the same layer. So whatever needs mixing, I will try to keep on the same layer. I am actually using watercolor brushes on this. I drew it with a sketching pen initially, and then it varies what brushes I use. If I need something that isn't going to blur, then you can use a paint or a pen or a marker pen brush. The options are already on there, and if you have Adobe, you can download lots of other brushes as well. They're available to you. So again, just using the colour wheel to darken up the grey a bit. It's a bit of a brownier grey, I think. I think it's mixing in with some of the grey I've already put there as well. That's better. I think I started to look at the screen and think, you can't see what I'm doing, and tried to get as much of it in as I could, as well as just focusing on what I was doing. So I think at this point it's time to go for the water. Now I've gone slanted there so that I can actually get the rhythm going of how I need to paint, but also so you can see. Oh, I've gone for the boats. That's what I went for next. Yeah, so basically I just look at the picture and I tend to try and work from the background forward. So it's the sky, it's the next layer, the trees, then it's the houses and the boats, and then it's the sea. But even once I've got all of that in, I still go back and adjust. I might shade. Yeah, it's just playing around really. Just try and enjoy it, and don't worry, because with digital, if you make a mistake, all you have to do is press the back button. And we all make mistakes still. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. You'll try something out and you'll be like, oh no, that's horrible, and just change it again. It's fine. The main thing, as I've said, is just enjoy it, and then you'll want to learn more and you'll want to keep doing it. Whereas if you're trying to be perfect all the time, it won't be fun. You won't enjoy it, and you won't want to learn anymore, and you won't want to go forward anymore. So the main thing is enjoy it, and if it doesn't turn out how you wanted or perceived, it doesn't really matter, does it? Just go for it. You can always try again. So yeah, I'm filling in the boat areas. I am doing it very loosely. I'm not worrying too much because my drawing's quite detailed. That's what's important. As long as I've got the general tone of the colour, the shade of the colour, then it's absolutely fine. I am looking quite closely at the image so that I can get most of the right colours in, and the right shades. Because even the littlest bit of colour can bring the whole image alive. I think I'm having some thinking time here. Always make time for thinking time. Thinking time really is what is observation time. So it's you can get so involved in like a tiny small part of it, and then you'll look back and go, oh, I've missed a bit. Oh, that doesn't look right. And then you'll notice, and you can go back and make changes. Now the good thing about working in layers is that you can go back to the layer where that item was, and then if you need to colour or blend it, you're doing it with the colouring and the blending that you've already put on that layer. Now here I'm holding the pen quite far down. Basically the rule of painting is that if you're holding the pen, pencil, brush really close to the nib, then you're going to be in detail mode. Basically everything will be very precise. and the further you hold the pen away, so your hand's more towards the back of the pen, the looser it will be, because you don't have as much control. And that's how I like to paint. But there are times when you'll see I'll move my hand forward because I'm trying to do the detail, and there are times when I'm practically holding the pen at the very end because I really want looseness, particularly with things like the trees in the background and the sea in a bit. It needs to be very loose, not tightly drawn. So here I'm holding it about halfway because it needs a bit of detail, but not too much. I generally don't work with detail because it makes projects, basically the more detail you add, the more time it takes, and my arms sadly won't last that very long, and it would take up far too much time for me. So I prefer to work in this looser style, which is a bit quicker for me. Even with the traditional actual real life watercolors, it means I can paint what I need to paint, but in a shorter amount of time. I tend not to use acrylics so much anymore. If you're using acrylics, if you're an artist or it's your hobby, then you like to use acrylics, you'll probably have some kind of easel, tabletop or freestanding and a canvas, but I can't do that myself anymore. A good way to adapt is I just leave it flat on the table now, and then I can rest my arm on the table, but I can't hold my arm up to paint to a canvas anymore like I used to. So there are ways of adapting. If you do have any kind of disabilities or illnesses, there's ways around it. I think I've even seen someone on Instagram painting with their feet, which is amazing. I'm not sure I could do that, but you know, maybe I would if I had to. Right, so we're going in, just finishing off some of the trees here. I'm picking out the colours I've used before. I've realised I've missed some bits because I hadn't painted in the colours of the buildings on that left hand side. I realised I've missed quite a few bits of trees, and I wanted them all to kind of mix in and for it to make sense. So I went on back on the same layer on the right of the screen. There's all the layers. I went back on, you see me clicking there, I went back on the layers, and then I went back into to finish off the colours I needed to do. So here I am on the building layer, and as I colour, you won't see the pen disappear this time because I am working actually underneath the pen drawing, so the pen drawing will then stay the most prominent on top. If you can imagine like sheets of paper on top of each other, they're the layers. So that, but they are, if you imagine that they're see-through, they're transparent. So the first one, my layer, is the pencil drawing. Underneath that are the colours of the sky. Underneath that are the colours of the trees. So in those layers you're building up the picture until there's no more transparency and everything is painted, but the layer on the top is the drawing, so that you will see that above all of the painting. That's generally how I view it and makes it simple. Again, don't forget you can use the colour picker tool, which just looks like one of those pipette things that we used to use in science classes. So you click on the pipette and then you can go on to the actual first image and it will pick the colour. Most of the time I don't use it. I like to just look and find the colour myself because then I think it's more natural, it's coming from within my head. Again, I'm not a photorealistic artist, and if you're not, then you don't need to do that too much. But if you want to get it exactly on, the colour picker is a great tool. Even if you want to get something close like I did before, and then you can just move the pen around on that colour wheel and you'll get what you want. Again, just going through, playing with the colours, picking the colours I want, deciding if it's what I want, was it right, trying something else. That's the joy of digital, you can just play around. And if you make a mistake, just press the back button. And sometimes if you don't like the whole layer that you've done, you can click on the layer and just press delete. There's loads of options. When you click on each layer, lots of options comes up, and delete is one of them. You can duplicate and things like that. You can group layers together. Once you've done a few layers and you think, oh, that kind of is all one, say I divided the trees into 3 different layers, well then I can group them into one, rather than having on that right hand side a very, very long tower of levels. You have to excuse me, sometimes I can't find my words because that's part of fibro, it's brain fog. So very often I can't think of the words, the names of things, the nouns. Layer, that was it, layer. Right, so painting in the bottom of that house. I've chosen a nice sort of grey brown colour, and now I'm just trying to mix in colours, but then I remember I'm on the wrong layer, so I need to go on the right layer. And I'm bringing back the light in where it needs to be, where I look, because if you keep looking from the photograph to the real image, you'll notice where something just doesn't look right. So I am doing a little bit more detail here, but still not too much, and I'm just holding the pen about halfway up. Again, to find the colour wheel, you just click on the brush button. There's at the top, there is the main button is for marker pens and pen brushes and splatter brushes and things like that. Then there's the watercolor button, and you have a choice of watercolor brushes, and below that you have vector brushes. So that's a whole different ball game. That's I don't tend to use that because I like to draw and paint, and the vector brushes, which you do draw and paint with as well, they basically mimic what you do in Illustrator. So just finishing off the buildings first, and then I go on to doing the sea and trying to get the reflections right in the sea. Now the finishing touches when I've done an area or a section is really going in and checking the lighter values and the darker values. I talk about values all the time, but it just amazes me how much, by going in and doing your darks and lights, making sure there are darks and lights in there, really can make your painting pop. It makes a complete difference. Makes it much more 3D, makes it much more realistic, which is why I went in and lightened that building up a bit, just because I felt like it was way too dark. And then, but I liked the fact that the grey was underneath, because then you get some natural kind of colour changes within the building. Nothing's perfectly one colour, is it, in real life? So I wanted to make sure that that was dealt with. I've still got a few bits to do on the buildings on the left here, so I shall be quiet now until all the buildings are done. So now it's time to start thinking about the water. I've pretty much finished all the buildings in the background. I've put a little bit of detail in, some shading. Everything's looking okay compared to the actual image. So now it's time for the water. Now when I look at the water, I'm thinking, right, transparency is what I need. So when I did that then, it was just too much of a line and I needed to get it looking watery. So it's a brand new layer, so no matter what I do on this layer, it is not going to affect anything on the other layers. Okay, it's just what's there, just within that. And then when I push it underneath, you'll see that it goes underneath everything else I've done. Now that's my first layer, and the reason why I'm doing the water that way is because when you then go across, it gives you that reflection feeling. You'll see, it's like magic. So I felt like some of the lines were showing too much, didn't like it. I'm trying out different things. Again, as I said, you don't get it perfect every time, you just want to try things out. Now I know I wanted to put some paler shadings in where the white buildings are, because if you look at the image below, there are a lot of kind of white reflections and grey reflections right up by the wall and the buildings, and then it gets reflecting into the green, which is what I've started now. So wherever the green trees are, that will be reflected back, and I'm just patching it in because eventually it will all blend in. I can change as I go along, just let it do what it needs to do for a while, and you might be looking at thinking, what is that mess? And it is, it's a hot mess to start with, especially when you're dealing with reflections. But it does get better, I promise. So now I'm going across ways, which kind of just shows that the water is there and it's flat. Here I am I decided to try and use the smudger. And then I think I went against that idea. I do like the smudge pen for smudging things, but I didn't use it for the whole time. But this is basically how reflections work. You go vertical, then you blend everything by going horizontal. And you can already see how it will end up looking. You've got an idea there, haven't you, of how the reflections are going to show up. So now I'm moving the layer underneath the other layers to make sure that it's underneath the boats and the buildings and you can't see anything that was over them. So now I'm just going back in over the boats. So where they were white and I want them to still be white, I've realised it's still transparent and showing up the colours I've put in for the sea. So now I have to just make sure the boats are all done with actual white, and then you won't be able to see it, it won't be transparent anymore. I've forgotten to move it onto a different layer and the brush was far too big. Again, the layer I'm on is underneath my pen layer, so it doesn't affect any of the drawing that I've already done. When you see me going down to that left corner with the pen, what I'm actually doing is just observing, and I know it looks like I'm doing something with the pen, but I'm not. I think my brain just uses the pen and I kind of point to where I'm looking and then I go back and do it on my drawing. There isn't anything happening down there in that bottom left corner, I'm just observing. Well, I say just, it's probably the most important thing. trying to use the rubber here, and I'm rubbing some things out that I'm not too happy with, just around the boats. And then I'm going to go in and put some shadow underneath the boats. Otherwise it looks like there's no reflection of them at all. But I need to be not too dark, because the boats aren't dark. But there needs to be something. I'm being indecisive here, and that's okay. Make sure you're on the right layer, especially if you want to blend. And that's what's really important. Just take your time. So I'm using just a bit of grey, a bit of white, mixing it in until I get it how I want. Going over what I've already put down. It's not making much change, and I think it's because I was on the wrong layer. So I changed layer. And although it's not making sudden difference, you can see the white not being so bright white. It needed a little bit of greying up. The whole thing did. So I'm just doing that kind of back part of the water. Once I feel as though I've kind of watered that all in, I'm going over with a brush with no colour on it at the moment. It's got no colour, it's just water, so it's kind of just dragging the colours out into each other a little bit so that it doesn't feel blocky, because it's meant to be water. There's not really blocks of colour there. There we go. Now I realised I think the green was a bit too low and I needed to push it up a little bit, so that was my next step. And then I realised it was actually very dark in the water, and then moved on to some of the blue, and I thought once I get that blue in, it will start to look even more like the image. Without that there, it was difficult to judge. Again, I'm doing all of the water on the same layer because I do want them to mix in. Won't make sense if there's just blocks of colour in the water. I think out of the whole image, the water and the reflections on the water is probably the trickiest bit to do and to get grasp of. But once you've done it a couple of times, you get into the habit of it, and you know what looks right and what doesn't look right. You can take things out if you don't like it, you can add them on. In some ways, real watercolour is a bit easier in this respect. So I've had a change of heart and I've gone over everything with a bit of blue because I felt like all of the colours at the back weren't quite right and they needed to be blended in to each other. And then I start to feel as though I'm getting somewhere. But this is the joy of digital. It's chop change, do things you like, do things you don't like, and eventually you get the look that you want. So here again, I'm blending in that lighter colour with the blue. I wanted a bit more blue in than you can really see in the real image, but I wanted to get it right for how I wanted it. So I'm just chopping and changing the colour. Now what happens after a while is my Microsoft gets tired, and because the watercolour brushes are really active brushes with all the blending and everything, they really do mimic real life brushes. I think it just taxes my Microsoft Surface Pro. I really recommend, if you can, get the one that's got the most gig and memory and everything, and hopefully it won't do what it does to me. It freezes a little bit. So here I am just mixing in, chopping and changing the colours, trying to make it as realistic as possible. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect like the image. As long as it looks like what it's meant to look like, then it's fine. Some people like it to be perfect, and I like it to be quite loose. I'm just taking some of the colour off because on the end image, I tend to, because it's usually for prints and postcards and cards, I take the edge off and do some rough edging just to be a little bit different, rather than have it completely just dead straight. So I'm quite happy with the water there. It's looking like murky water. Now I've got a real idea of where the blue should be, and I really haven't had enough blue. It was too much green. Always observing, always just looking at my version, looking at their version. Does mine make sense? And after a while I stop looking at the photograph and just look at my picture and think, just does it make sense to the eye? That's all that matters really, is that your brain can make sense of it, and it, oops, I don't know what I did there. But that was a hot mess. Yes, so what I like to do at the end is just to draw some sweeping lines. This is a really good tip for where there are reflections. Get a nice colour that's close to the colours in the water, and then it feels like you're being sucked into the image, into the background. It just gives also a real sense of reflection. And some of it, like there, you can hardly really see anyway, but it does make a little bit of difference. Yeah. I think there, looking at that, I think I'm pretty much finished, and I just want to go out and rub some of the edges out. Again, it's playing up because it's tired. Right, and this is what I tend to do with all my pictures. I like create a nice edge, and then I rub out the background, and then that makes my final image. And you saw there, look, I can't quite get that edge right, so I'm pressing the back button, and then I stopped doing it anyway, because then I realised actually what I need to do is download it as an entire image rather than layers, because when I try to rub out the edge, I have forgotten that I can't. I have to go to every single layer to rub out the colours that are on those layers. You'll see. But that's generally like the kind of shapes I do when I'm finishing off my designs. I just rub out the edges. Sometimes I do watercolour splashes around the edges, because I quite like that as well. So here I am. We go to export, and here you tap in where there's a name and give it a name, and then download it as a PNG or a JPEG, whatever you want to do. PNGs are the most high quality, but they do take up a lot of room on your memory, on your computers or laptops or whatever, so you might want to just do JPEGs. Depends what you're using it for. But if you're going to use it just on social media or anything like that, you don't want it to be too high quality. So I've exported that as an image, and now what I'm going to do is upload it as one image. It won't have layers, it's just the image, and it won't have that other photo in it either, so I'm just exiting my drawing. That file will save, so if I wanted to go in and change anything, I still can. The layers will be there. It's saving as a project within Fresco. So there you can see the project right there. But what I'll do is I'll open a new blank project, 10 by 8, because that's my print size. Click on the button down the bottom left, which is the image of picture, how to add an image. There we are. Sorry, the light seems to be shining quite badly at the moment there. And then you find your picture that you've just saved. Click on it. I was in the wrong place. Couldn't find it. There we are. So that's now loaded up into a new 10 by 8 project. And all I've done is just shrink it a little bit so I can see the edges of the background. Then I'm going to get pen. I think there I clicked on pencil. Going to get black pen, sketching. I go down to sketching and then I click on pen. Again, my system is struggling. Freeze, freeze. Okay, finally I get there. At least I know that I'm coming towards the end now. Sometimes I have to stop and give the system a break before I start using it again. So now I'm just trying to get the right outlining that I want to use. You need to kind of stay within the lines. You don't want any blank spaces. And yeah, just draw in something that looks how you want it. Don't forget this is kind of at an angle, so it doesn't look very straight to you, but the final one is. And you can see the final image, I think, on the cover. I think I've put it on the cover for you. I'm not happy about that bottom. I just can't seem to get it right. It's like I'm not getting enough in, and then I'm getting too much in. But this is the joy of the back button. If you don't like it, try again. I think I'm getting there now. Pretty happy. Now I have done that drawing on another layer, so that will be the top layer. So now I get the rubber and I go back to my main image and I just start rubbing around that layer. Again, you don't have to be too fussy. This is a loose kind of modern picture. It doesn't matter if some of it disappears. I can't remember what I did here. I did this quite a while ago. I must have not been very happy with it. So I've gone back and started again, but the joy is press the back button as many times as you like and back to where you are. Back to the beginning. So I've done that on a different layer. I think that was the problem. I hadn't done it on a different layer. And I was rubbing out that and I didn't want to rub out that. So here we are. We're now going into the layer of the painting and rubbing around the edge, and it will not remove the pen you've just drawn because you're on a different layer. Even my brain gets tired, let alone the Surface Pro. And again, like I said, it doesn't need to be perfect. Sometimes I then create another layer and I like to do like splashes around the edges as well, which is quite good fun. But not always. And to be honest, the more kind of rough it is, the more real it looks, you know, like you've actually painted with paints. It's not that this is a trick or anything, because digital painting is tough. It's not as easy as people think. That I think many people think, you know, it's a click of a button, but you are actually drawing in the same way and painting in the same way as if it was paints and pencils. It's just that it's with these brushes, and you have to learn how to use the system and figure out how everything works. It took me a very long time, to be honest. I found learning to paint with your normal watercolours much easier than I did learning how to do this. Just finishing off some of the edges that I wasn't happy with. Sometimes I like them to cross over and sometimes I don't. Again, it's what's ever pleasing to your own eye, because you're doing it and you know best. So here I'm publishing the final one. You can add text in Fresco, but I tend to load it up to, I use Canva for social media and for making up my prints and things. So I load it up to Canva as this image, then I add text. So I'll say what town it is that I've just done underneath. And then I can use it to make mock-ups on Canva. I can use it to make templates to print from. And there we have it. There's the final one. I hope that was of help.